Welcome back to Disturbed Reality. Haiti, a nation defined by its vibrant culture, resilient people, and tumultuous history, is currently ensnared in a crisis of alarming proportions. A gang epidemic that has plunged much of the country into chaos and fear. This escalating gang problem is not merely a matter of criminal activity, it is a humanitarian crisis that threatens the very fabric of Haitian society. The roots of this issue run deep, intertwined with decades of political instability, economic deprivation, and social inequality. In recent years, the scale and brutality of gang violence has reached unprecedented levels, casting a shadow over daily life and leaving countless Haitians trapped in a cycle of despair. The proliferation of gangs in Haiti is not a recent phenomenon, but their role and influence has grown dramatically in the past 2 decades. In the absence of effective governance, gangs have exploited the void to assert control over large swaths of the country, particularly in the capital, Port-au-Prince. According to reports, more than 60% of the capital is now under gang control, a staggering statistic that underscores the severity of the problem. Political instability has been a key driver for this crisis. Haiti's fraught political history, marked by coups, corrupt administrations, and contested elections, has undermined trust in government institutions. Successive administrations have either been unwilling or unable to address the root causes of gang proliferation. In some cases, politicians have even forged alliances with gangs to secure their own power, a practice that has emboldened these criminal networks and provided them with resources to expand their influence. Economic deprivation is another critical factor. Haiti is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, with more than half of its population living below the poverty line. For many young men in impoverished communities, gangs offer a perverse sense of opportunity and belonging that the formal economy cannot provide. Promises of financial gain, protection, and status lure vulnerable individuals into these criminal organizations, perpetuating the cycle of violence. The impact of gang violence in Haiti is devastating and multifaceted, affecting every aspect of life for millions of people. Communities under gang control endure constant threats of extortion, kidnapping, and murder. Women and young girls find themselves particularly vulnerable, with reports of sexual violence being used as a tool of intimidation and dominance. Schools, businesses, and healthcare facilities are often forced to close in areas plagued by gang activity, depriving residents of essential services and deepening their suffering. One of the most heinous crimes associated with gangs in Haiti is kidnapping. Once rare, kidnappings have surged to epidemic levels in recent years. According to data from the Center Analysis and Research in Human Rights, there were over 1,000 reported kidnappings in Haiti in 2022, a figure that only scratches the surface of the true scale of the problem. Victims range from schoolchildren to market vendors to clergy members, and the ransom demands often exceed what most families can afford. The psychological trauma inflicted on victims and their families is immeasurable, leaving scars that linger long after the incident. Gang violence also frequently escalates into outright massacres. In April of 2020, the Croix de Bequet area of Port-au-Prince became the site of one of the most horrific incidents in recent memory. Rival gangs engaged in a brutal turf war, leaving hundreds dead or injured. Entire neighbourhoods were set ablaze, forcing thousands of residents to flee their homes. Survivors described scenes of unimaginable horror, charred bodies lying in the streets, families torn apart, and a pervasive sense of helplessness. There were reports of dismemberment, beheadings, and cannibalism, to name a few of the atrocities. The humanitarian consequences of the gang crisis in Haiti are dire. Displacement is one of the most visible effects, with tens of thousands of people forced to flee their homes to escape violence. According to the United Nations, as of late 2023, more than 200,000 Haitians were internally displaced, many living in overcrowded shelters with inadequate access to food, water, and medical care. The health system, already fragile before the surge in gang violence, is now on the brink of total collapse. Medical personnel face constant threats, and ambulances are often unable to navigate gang-controlled areas, delaying critical care. In some cases, gangs have targeted hospitals directly, stealing supplies or using them as bases of operations. Education has also suffered immensely. Schools in gang-dominated areas frequently shut down, either because teachers and students are too afraid to attend, or because gangs commandeer school buildings for their own purposes. The disruption of education has long-term implications for Haiti's future, robbing an entire generation of the skills and knowledge needed to rebuild the country. The international community has taken notice of Haiti's plight, but the response has been inconsistent and often inadequate. While humanitarian organisations provide vital aid to affected communities, the scale of the crises demands a more robust and coordinated approach. Calls for international intervention have grown louder, especially after the assassination of President Jovenel Moïse in July of 2021, which exacerbated the country's political and security vacuum. However, interventions in Haiti are fraught with challenges. Past efforts, including United Nations peacekeeping missions, have faced criticism for failing to address the root causes of instability and, in some cases, causing additional harm. For example, the cholera outbreak, linked to UN peacekeepers in 2010, remains a painful memory for many Haitians, complicating efforts to build trust and cooperation. Addressing the gang crisis in Haiti requires a multifaceted approach that tackles both the symptoms and the root causes of a problem. Strengthening the capacity of the Haitian National Police is essential to restoring law and order. Currently, the HNP is woefully under-resourced, with fewer than 15,000 officers for a population of over 11 million. International support for training, equipment, and intelligence sharing could significantly enhance the police force's ability to combat gangs. Of course, economic development must also be a priority. Creating jobs and improving access to education and healthcare can help address the conditions that drive young people into gangs. Microfinance initiatives, vocational training programs, and infrastructure projects could provide alternative pathways for those living in poverty. On the political front, fostering good governance is crucial. Transparent elections, judicial reforms, and anti-corruption measures can help rebuild trust in government institutions and reduce the influence of gangs. Engaging civil society organisations and community leaders in these efforts can also promote local ownership and sustainability. Finally, international actors must tread carefully but decisively. Any intervention should prioritise the needs and the voices of the Haitian citizens, avoiding the mistakes of past efforts. Long-term engagement rather than short-term fixes will be key to achieving lasting change. The gang crisis in Haiti is a complex and deeply entrenched issue that demands urgent attention. It is a tragedy not only for the individuals directly affected, but for the nation as a whole, undermining hopes for peace, stability, and prosperity. Yet, amidst the despair, there does remain a glimmer of hope. Haiti's history is one of resilience, and its people have repeatedly demonstrated their ability to overcome immense challenges. By addressing the root causes of gang violence, political instability, and social inequality, and by fostering a coordinated national and international response, it is possible to chart a path forward towards a brighter future. The road will of course be long and arduous, but the stakes are too high to ignore. For the sake of Haiti's children, its communities, and its future, the fight against gang violence must remain a global priority. In the past few years, due to the current landscape of the country, Haiti has produced an insane amount of graphic videos. It wouldn't be exaggerating to say, on average, at least one horrific video comes out per week, showcasing the utter depravity that many are suffering in the country. Although countries such as Mexico and Brazil garner most of the headlines when it comes to filmed atrocities committed by gangs, the reality is, far more of such videos come out of Haiti, and today we will cover two, one of which is very recent, and although the year is young, is certainly the worst piece of graphic content to be released in the new year. But nevertheless, what happens in the actual videos? The first video is actually 3 separate clips detailing the torture and murder of a police officer. The gang responsible are known as 103 Zombies, who seem to be a coalition of smaller gangs who have joined together. The gang are considered one of the worst and most violent in Haiti. Notably, in the summer of 2024, they were responsible for the massacre of at least 25 people in the small town of Grazier. They are known for their extortion and kidnapping rings, which is their main income generator, though they also dabble in drug trafficking and other crimes. In relation to the victim, who is a police officer, it is unknown as to why he ended up in that position. Some suggest that he may have been on the payroll of a rival gang. The first video is 1 minute and 50 seconds in length, and the clip has been shot during the dead of night, seemingly in a rural village or on the outskirts of a town. In the video, you see the captive, a man who is laying on his back on the ground with his hands tied behind his back. He's already taken a beating prior to recording. You see a smudge of blood on his face, and he lays on the ground in utter dejection. No emotion on his face, nor does he respond to his captors who are mocking him throughout. The victim just looks up at the sky as he lays on the ground, displaying a level of stoicism that is rare in such circumstances. Several men then surround the victim. Others in the mob are also filming the events on their mobile phones. One of the men then instructs the victim to tilt his head to the side, and he does. In doing so, he exposes his left ear. A man with a small pink fillet knife then kneels down over the victim and proceeds to slice his left ear off, cutting through the skin and cartilage incredibly quickly. The victim doesn't even flinch as his ear is severed from the side of his head. The knife-wielding maniac then holds the severed ear before then forcing the victim to open his mouth. The severed ear is then placed inside the mouth and the victim is instructed to eat it. The man begins chewing on his own severed ear, committing forced auto-cannibalism. He chews and chews and chews as he lays on the ground. You hear him try to bite through the tough, spongy cartilage. The chewing sounds are awful, though his abductors don't think so. You hear multiple people laugh as this happens. The victim lays on the ground, chewing on his own ear for a solid minute. This is where the first video ends. The second video is short, at only 20 seconds. You now see that the victim has been knocked out, and I think that his other ear has been severed. One of the gang members in a POV style shot holds the severed ear to the camera and he walks over to a grill, insinuating that he's going to cook it. The third video details the murder of the police officer. The last clip is just over 4 minutes in length. As you play the clip, you see the victim, who still has his hands tied behind his back, and he is sitting on a concrete forecourt. It's incredibly dark, but one of the men shines a flashlight at the victim, illuminating him around his dark surroundings. The men can be heard laughing at the victim once again. It's also worth noting that the captive looks saturated with some kind of liquid, and the ground surrounding him is also wet. All of a sudden, a man pulls out a box of matches. He strikes a match against the box, and it ignites. He then throws the match at the victim, but it goes out. This makes the men laugh psychotically. Another match is then lit, and once again, the man attempts to throw it at the victim. This time, he completely misses, and it goes over the victim's head. You see the captive grimace and brace himself as this happens. A third match is then lit, and once again it is thrown at the victim. It lands in his lap, but once again, it doesn't ignite. The person throwing the matches begins to get frustrated. He then lights two at the same time, and throws both of them at the victim. The would-be killers are beginning to get impatient. Once again, the man doesn't ignite. Finally, another match is then lit and thrown at the victim. It lands in his lap, and instantly, the captive goes up in a ball of fire. This actually audibly startles one of the gang members. The poor victim begins to roll, and he kicks his legs violently, which draws laughs from the sadistic zombie gang members. The victim tries to roll on the concrete forecourt, into the grass and shrubbery next to it, but before he can get there, his body essentially seizes up. He then lays on the ground as he burns to death. The killers intermittently squirt the burning victim with more flammable liquid, keeping the flames raging. The next 3 minutes of the video is essentially the killers watching the victim burn, as they laugh, joke, and even play jovial music in the background. As the video progresses, the body progressively gets more charred, and the clothes that he is wearing begin to melt and fuse into the skin. It's an extremely distressing selection of clips. The videos themselves, I believe, came out in mid-2024. The next video is far more recent, having been released at the beginning of 2025, and although the year is young, it is certainly the most graphic video of its kind to be released so far. It seems to be yet another gang-related video, though who is responsible is up for debate. The clip itself is just over 3 minutes in length, and is incredibly graphic. This one also comes with a sound warning. The video has been shot during daytime in what looks to be a rural location. It looks as if the clip has been shot in a field or a meadow. As you play the video, you see a shirtless man who is laying on the ground on his stomach, and a machete is being held against his neck as he is interrogated by the multiple people surrounding him. Unlike the first videos covered, you see the look of distress on the man's face, and his voice shakes as he tries his best to answer his captor's questions. As the interrogation commences, the person filming then also holds his machete against the man's neck. The captive sounds to give up the name of somebody, possibly a member of the gang he represents. At this point, the person filming brushes his machete on the back of the man's neck, which causes the victim to duck on the floor instinctively. In doing so, the poor captive completely flattens himself out, laying face first on the ground. At this point, the cameraman and also another member of the gang take their machetes and line both of them up with the back of the victim's neck, and both begin to simultaneously slice back and forth. They're attempting to carry out a reverse beheading using 2 machetes. The victim then lets out a horrific high-pitched squeal that are like nails down a chalkboard. They are utterly horrific. Both machetes are ridiculously sharp, and they cut through the flesh insanely quickly. One of the machetes actually has teeth like a wood saw. After a few seconds, the horrific squeals stop when both killers simultaneously reach the spine, and also cut through the carotid arteries. Blood erupts, puddling incredibly quickly. The man's head, in a matter of a few seconds, is essentially half decapitated at this stage. The video takes a jump cut, and at this point the captive has been fully beheaded, and both arms have been severed at the shoulders. At this point in the video, the person with the hybrid saw machete takes the saw side of the blade and begins to cut vertically down the man's chest, and you hear the teeth of the blade cut through the sternum bone. It's a grinding type sound, similar if you were to saw wood. A huge vertical gash has been made from the top of the victim's chest down to his abdominal area. To cut through the sternum bone, the killer uses his hand to hammer the machete blade through the bone, and he manages to break the sternum down the middle. At this point, a man with a hunting knife then enters the fray, and he cuts under the ribcage on the left side of the body. Once he's made the cut, he then essentially lifts the ribcage, exposing the man's diaphragm and eventually his heart. He then tries to rip the heart out with his bare hands, but he can't. He cuts around the ribcage some more to open up the body further, and in doing so, it gives him more room to rummage around inside the body cavity. He grabs the heart again with his bare hand, and he takes his combat knife and proceeds to cut it out of the body. The person who cut the heart out then hands it to the cameraman. The cameraman holds it in front of the camera, and it's still beating. Every time the heart beats, the person filming makes a noise to mimic it. After each beat, he goes boop, 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 trying to mimic the heartbeat. It's incredibly messed up. The video ends as the victim lays in a pile of body parts. But anyway, that is the video. I hope you enjoyed it if you can enjoy this sort of content. As I record this video, I do apologise, I think it may be slightly shorter, but I've been having internet issues to start the year, so that's been fun. So yeah, my research and whatnot hasn't been as thorough as I'd like it to be. But Yeah, guys, thank you for the support. It's much appreciated. If you're new here, if you could hit subscribe. Anybody who's interested, the links to my Twitter, my Twitch, etc. will be in the pinned comments. We are closing in on 3,000 followers on Twitch. So if you could help me get there, that would be much appreciated. But anyway, guys, as always, stay safe. And I'll catch you on the next one.